The world is evolving at a faster pace than ever before, and as we begin the path to recovery after worldwide disruption, this podcast explores how the design industries can adapt to changing expectations and create a better future for both your businesses and your consumers. I'm Bethan Ryder, Executive Editorial Director here at WGSN. You're listening to Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast. We covered the move to omnichannel retail in episode 20 back in February, but as we enter what's traditionally the busiest time for retail in many regions, we thought it was time to shine a light on bricks and mortar stores and discuss what brands and retailers can do to lure consumers back. What's the future of the store, and what hybrids or strategies can businesses employ to play a part in creating thriving cities again? Or is there something else entirely new around the corner we're going to see in the future? Discussing this with me today is Ian McGarrigle from our sister essential brand World Retail Congress. Hi Ian.
Hi Bethan, great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And we've got Laura Saunter, our senior strategist on Insight and one of our retail experts. Hi Laura.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And also Joe McGinn, our senior strategist who oversees our City by City platform and basically knows what's going on around the world in stores and on high streets. Hi Joe.
Hi, Bethan.
Right, so I'd like to kick off about the point that we're sort of reaching this busy time for retail and the holiday season, and I'm wondering if consumers will be flooding back to shops in real life, or do we think that we've all got far too cosy at home and we'll be shopping online? And I wanted to sort of open that up really to Ian, first of all, to see what he's seeing out there.
Well, I think the context of, as we go into this busy period is this massive acceleration of e-commerce that, of course, we've seen since the start of the pandemic, and e-commerce has grown dramatically, and that's going to be the big question facing retailers going beyond the Christmas period. Is what's it going to settle down, the mix between online and offline, and that's going to be fascinating to see what's going to happen this Christmas. I mean, there is some evidence that that huge growth rate of e-commerce has started to ease back, particularly in, say, the food sector for obvious reasons. I think one thing we definitely are seeing, and that's not just in the UK, certainly in the US as well, with the supply chain crisis that retail and other business sectors is having to contend with, where there's the real threat of shortages of certain products. What that's leading to is Christmas has definitely been brought forward earlier. We're hearing from retailers in many places that shopping for Christmas started earlier, and people have been worried about getting particularly toys, obviously those key products, but also the big food retailers are reporting that people are stocking up early in the essential food areas for Christmas. So it's I'm not quite sure we know quite the answer yet on that mix between online and offline. I think convenience and being sure that you can get what you need is going to favour on online purchases. People are going to be searching to make sure they can get it and placing their orders. So I think from a store point of view that's going to be the case. But Christmas is Christmas in terms of when we think about what Christmas was like last year, which as the popular media called it, Christmas was cancelled. I mean, I think people don't want to repeat that, and I think that sense of you're seeing Christmas decorations in the towns and cities and the stores looking great again. Will that drive footfall and people wanting to have that Christmas experience? We're not quite sure yet, but I think we can say it's going to be a better Christmas than last year, that's for sure. Yeah,
I've certainly noticed among just friends that people seem to already be getting the decorations up, like really early this year. Laura, do you see a sign of it going one way? I mean, I feel like people love to go out and feel all Christmassy, don't they, and hit the shops. I'm hoping that kind of wish to kind of get in the Christmas mood will take people back out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably what we're going to see is a bit of a kind of hybrid approach to people shopping for Christmas this year. So kind of marrying the, some online shopping with some in-store shopping. I think the in-store shopping will largely be around the experience, people with families, people with kids, people who may be worried about not being able to get what they want online. So, maybe they're trying to hunt it down in store and wrestle someone over the last, toy in Selfridges or whatever it is. But I think what we'll definitely see is a continuation of this kind of omni-channel approach to shopping, where people were sort of doing click and collect, curbside retail. That saw a huge spike last year, people opting to buy online and pick up in store. And I think that will definitely continue. But just to kind of go back to what Ian was saying about the disruption in terms of the global supply chain, it's going to be really difficult for people to get hold of some things. Some retailers are kind of holding back on discounting because they want to kind of retain their inventory for as long as possible to kind of maintain stock levels. I think it's going to be really difficult to keep pace with the consumer demand, especially for a lot of retailers. And obviously the situation is not really going away. So that's why people are kind of buying earlier. They're being encouraged to celebrate earlier. And I think a lot of the campaigns that have come out, I know that Very in the UK and some of the other big retailers released their Christmas campaigns, I think on the 1st of October, I want to say, which was the earliest it's ever been. So just kind of anticipating this huge demand and knowing that there's going to be huge expectations and not enough supply in many parts of the world for many products. So I think in answer to your question, it's going to be this combination of online shopping and in store. But we are going to see this continuation of this huge spike in kind of these omni-channel fulfillment services. So things like bringing your items to your car and things like that. But I think most importantly, retailers really need to be prepared around things like staffing and fulfillment, because there's going to be a lot of shoppers with a lot of different kind of hybrid needs, and the season will be quite disrupted again, I think.
Going back to kind of the shuttering of stores and the kind of closures we've seen, I wonder I know there's been a big discussion in the UK, Ian, about sort of business rates and how retailers can be helped with bricks and mortar. What role do you see or policies do you see kind of the retail world needing?
Well, it's a really good point, because what you raise there, it is a very specifically UK problem or issue, but it is in greater or lesser degree seen in other markets. But it's just the sheer cost of running sort of physical space. But in the UK, as you mentioned, business rates are a huge disproportionate tax for retail businesses or anyone operating sort of properties in towns and city centres. In the last recent budget, the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer brought in some mild reforms, and again they're continuing to look at this, but they're not looking at a radical sort of shake-up of the business rates. And the British Retail Consortium and all leading retailers are still saying it's not a level playing field, and it's really going to drive more of the bigger retailers or retailers generally to close more stores. Perhaps more of a tipping point than they would need to close. We have seen lots of closures. It goes back to a structural issue in many countries around the world, where over the 80s and 90s and 2000s, retail grew on the back of boom years, and that was the retail model, was to open physical space. Well, we're in a different world now, but also when when you've got situations like the cost base driven by tax and rent levels which aren't related to the reality of today, then these are big issues, and they're going to force a structural change in retail that perhaps could be avoided, I think.
We were talking, Laura, about how it's quite regional, the impact on retail. Like, it's very much a kind of US, UK, European problem, but other world regions like APAC have actually not really suffered such a great number of losses and closures. Do you see that, Laura, just APAC just sort of going from strength to strength?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, they're way ahead of the curve in the APAC region when it comes to that kind of digital shopping experience where you're kind of marrying the physical and the digital. And I think with the advancement of the metaverse and physical stores becoming much more experiential, and all this new technology which is coming out, which is kind of helping to merge the two channels of kind of online and offline shopping, I think there's some incredible examples already coming out of APAC. If you look at what they were doing with the most recent Singles Day, which was last Thursday, I believe, some brands were already kind of launching these amazing activations across different platforms. So they had these kind of VR designed multi-brand events where shoppers could buy, NFT artworks, and it was sponsored by brands like Burberry and Coach and things. And it was this combination of physical and digital, or phygital. But I think ultimately, what they do really well in China especially is they are so good at drawing people into the store, especially young people, because they have this kind of this sort of clout chasing shopper who is obsessed with novelty, who's obsessed with kind of showing off on their social media, on their TikTok, and what the stores do really well over there is they actually enable content creation in the stores. So if you look at kind of L'Oreal and what they've done in their new store in Shanghai, is they've kind of opened up this big space where basically people can come in and they can create TikToks, they can live stream, they can make YouTube videos from the store, and it's all set up and enabled to do that. And so, you're kind of creating all this content, you're broadcasting it, live streaming it to your friends, and then your friends are incentivized to come into the store. And so it's this kind of whole new angle on experiential retail, which is really interesting. And it is coming over here in the West, but they've already really nailed it in APAC. And I think another thing about the region in particular is that they didn't have as many shutdowns as we had. They were able to mobilize very quickly. They have a very strong e-commerce infrastructure, which obviously, a lot of the brands over here didn't have. So that's why we did see so much kind of death of the high street and stores and brands suffering, because they struggled to adapt as much.
Completely agree with Laura there. What we've just seen with 11.11, because it's now a whole shopping festival over 11 days in China, which was started by Alibaba, but all retailers now joining. But just talking to particularly Alibaba in the West, so to speak, Christmas of course is planned as a program, but the level of planning in China that I was hearing about from the key players, working with brands, working with international retailers, and developing new product lines and really understanding the Chinese consumer and coming up with new and exciting experiential approaches, as well as literally new bespoke product lines for the festival. I mean, this for me sort of shows part of the way forward that retail needs to go. If it has to create that excitement and that level of engagement with consumers. Can't just rely on the fact that it's the golden quarter, it's the holiday season. It needs a new level of planning and understanding and using the exciting new opportunities that exist, whether it's live streaming or social media like TikTok, to really reach consumers in a new and exciting way, both in store and online, of course.
I just wondered, Joe, you're doing our wonderful city guides every month. What kind of things are you? Well, they're great. They're so great for people that aren't travelling anymore. Any of our clients that are kind of stuck and looking for inspiration around the world. So what kind of experiential retail things are happening, and are you seeing in some of your city reports that you've been doing?
Well, yeah, we're seeing a lot of exciting concepts. Looking again, like you were saying, across to APAC, there's some fantastic whole cultural and artistic experiences around the concept of a mall in that region. In Hong Kong, our correspondent in Hong Kong has been looking a lot at the concepts cropping up there, and one that's been established for a while, actually, K11 Musea is a really great example of how a mall can merge art and culture into the whole retail experience, but also nature. And it really prioritises nature. It's got an outdoor nature park, it's got an urban farm, it hosts events such as gardening and art workshops for kids. And in the summer, it even created this whole indoor skate park where visitors could take part in skateboarding workshops. So it's created this sort of destination, especially for young people, I think, who don't just want to go shopping. They want to have a whole recreational experience, and something that makes them feel like they've passed the day in a good way, in a sort of in a thoughtful way, and there's more than just about retail and shopping. But of course, that is part of the element of it, and that's why it works. Really, I think it's just giving you those different aspects of an experience. So, yeah, I think definitely, like the others said, Asia is a real innovator for those exciting new complexes.
And I mean, presumably with all the kind of shuttered empty lots in the US and UK, this is presumably the age of the pop-up as well, or it's really able to come into its own, sort of temporary stores. So yeah, are you seeing that too, that kind of pick up?
Pop-ups, I think, I mean, they've been around for a long time now, but I think they're really coming of age and becoming established, the established way for a brand to either launch a new collection or create some buzz or test a new market, but also just, bring together their community around something, creating this sort of destination space to bring their communities together around a brand. And I think Gucci has recently opened a new concept called Circolo, I think I've pronounced that right, in Shoreditch and other cities. And the one in Shoreditch is a really nice example of engaging the community locally. It calls itself a neighbourhood-centric space. It partners with local brands, it hosts events, but also the space itself is designed to be explored like a private home. So it has its own listening lounge where you can listen to music. There's a bookstore, a cafe. So again, I think it's a very sophisticated version of the concept of a pop-up.
Are you thinking is there going to be a kind of confluence of now that the office is sort of is a question mark over the office and people returning to offices and whether we'll go back to office culture? I know that there's a move with hospitality, with people working in hotels and restaurants, but are we kind of seeing that retailers are also offering places for people to work? So there's a blending of that, like co-working in a retail space.
Definitely, I think Shopify New York is a good example because it's opened a space where you can go and record podcasts and work there as well. So you can rent studios by the hour. So it's sort of, again, selling product, but also engaging local businesses or local entrepreneurs to come and work within the space as well. So that's a nice example of two concepts in one.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's supposed to be a kind of entrepreneurial hub for members or customers, and you can kind of come in and there's like a retail store and there's like a podcast studio and a photo studio and things like that. But I think, more and more we've been talking about the idea of the store or the mall or the department store or any kind of retailer that's really struggling to think about what to do with their square footage, legacy retailers who have a big portfolio, who have a lot of space. And I think really what it comes down to is this idea of, thinking about your space as the new kind of third place of people wanting to spend more time there beyond shopping or beyond, transiting home. How can people come to work, to exercise, to eat, to socialise in your store? Maybe shopping is the sideline activity. And obviously this was something that was kind of picking up pace pre-pandemic, and then it had a huge hiatus, but it really is coming back where, we're looking at people who are thinking about, how can I craft my space around remote working? How can I put fast Wi-Fi and comfortable seating areas into my store? How can I draw people in for extended periods of time? Encourage them to kind of eat meals here and come here and even work out here, and, offering things like exercise classes, like Selfridges has had Soul Cycle classes in their store. You can get married there now. I mean, obviously that's an extreme example, but, we've got indoor cycling tracks in the Funan Mall in Singapore and things like that. But just, this idea of kind of making the shopping space a very kind of comprehensive destination really for people to come. And I think that's especially important because fewer people are seeing the necessity of visiting a store if they can buy something online. So you really have to give people a lot more reason to kind of get out and shop, and that's where this idea of the store as the third place is coming in.
I completely agree, and just looking at what's going to drive footfall, and you can really see it in towns and cities as they've reopened. I mean, people are rushing back to eat out and go to bars and socialise. If we're not seeing that uptick quite so much in brick and mortar retail, we're definitely seeing it in, I say, bars and restaurants and places to go. And I think we need to look at what's that, the mix between retail and food and beverage to make towns and city centres attractive places to go, because I think it's just going to be a different balance. But I think we should take real encouragement from how well, because, let's be honest, casual dining was a tough sector before the pandemic hit. But, now we're seeing sort of new bars and restaurants, not necessarily run by big chains, sort of opening up. And that's, I think, an important new trend where we're seeing, people flocking to new bars, new restaurants, and retail can learn from that and also benefit from that footfall. And like Laura says also, how can retail use its space, redundant space, to bring in some of those new ideas to help drive footfall into the retail space.
I've been tracking retail spaces for a long time and stores, and I think there's a lot of really, really exciting new concepts and formats which are going to come into the mainstream next year. We're seeing, things like mobile stores and on-the-road retail, and this idea of, the store at your door kind of coming through, bringing the store really directly to customers' doors in a very kind of creative and a personalised way, whether that's an actual kind of trundling along store, within a truck, or whether it's, Louis Vuitton, what they did in spring this year, where they had a traveling capsule store, which kind of brought personalized selection of products to all of their top sellers in California. It was like a mobile boutique. So things like that. I'm also seeing the return of the shop-in-shop. I mean, we used to call it a concession, but, the shop-in-shop concept is not new at all, but it's having a huge kind of renaissance and a big evolution, because retailers and department stores are really thinking about how they can rethink their store layouts as people are buying online more and more. And that's where we're seeing these kind of really interesting retailer crossovers, things like Target bringing Apple into their stores. I think they're upping it to about 36 across the US now in time for Christmas, so you can go into any Target and you can buy Apple products. John Lewis is putting mini versions of its stores into Waitrose grocery stores, that kind of thing. And then obviously in the beauty space you have Target and Ulta, which is a huge kind of cosmetics and beauty retailer, also Kohl's and Sephora. So just the idea of kind of driving traffic in new ways and kind of solving problems around square footage by making it a little bit more experiential, making it more fun, giving people a reason to come in, and really speaking to that shift.
I mean, presumably there's also here, because of the empty shops and things in the US and the UK, is there a bit more opportunity for new, young, emerging brands to actually get some space on a high street? Yeah,
definitely. I think, what we're seeing is this much more flexibility around leasing strategies, because, people don't want to pay into really long leases anymore. They don't know whether their store is going to succeed. They don't know whether they're going to have a market. So, they want to be a bit more temporary. They want to be a bit more ephemeral. And that's where we're seeing, you know, these kind of more flexible formats, even stores which can be moved from location to location, as I was saying before, not just mobile, but, you know, like a temporary store made from things like reused shipping containers, you know, even created out of flat pack boxes, that kind of thing. There's an accessories brand in the US called Kayana, I think I've said that right, but they're experimenting with this new store design, which is basically like made up of these 3 kind of shipping container sized boxes, and you can kind of attach them together to create this showroom, and it trundles around America and it pops up and it has like this beautiful store design inside it, and you know, it's a really good way of introducing the brand to new markets quickly and easily. But just to go back to what you were saying about emerging brands as well, I think what we're seeing is much more openness from traditional retailers to open up their stores to emerging brands, and even this idea of kind of sharing space. We first talked about shared space stores, I think back in like 2016, when retailers are kind of starting to build alliances with each other, because, you know, you have brand and brand collaborations a lot, but it's quite rare that you see like retail collaborations. You know, with stores actually opening up their space to other stores, and saying, you know, let's work together for half the rent, or, you know, we can expose each other, you know, we can be exposed to a new customer base. We had, you know, Nordstrom opened up their 3 of their stores earlier this year to Dover Street Market, which was really interesting because, you know, bringing Dover Street Market Paris into Nordstrom in the US, like that's the first time that DSM has ever done something like that. They essentially put a downsized version of their store into Nordstrom. And, you know, it's a real kind of sign of the times. It's like, you know, retail is kind of evolving and it's very challenging. So how can retailers team up and really think, hey, let's open a collective? I know that next year Uniqlo and Theory are opening a joint store together on Regent Street. And that's the first time in history that the two... Yeah, so the 2 brands, they're gonna share the same store on Regent Street. So it's going to be, I think Uniqlo is going to be on the first 2 floors, and Theory is going to be kind of interspersed between it, and you can walk from one space to the other. So, you know, it's just really interesting new strategies around bringing that idea of, you know, different brands and different experiences. And I think if you look at what Stella McCartney did as well, earlier this year when she opened up after the lockdown in her Bond Street store, she gave her entire store over to host a series of pop-ups from local emerging brands in London. So instead of, you know, opening back up and being like, here I am, I'm Stella, I'm back, you know, buy my clothes, she actually handed it over her space to local businesses. So she had like a flower studio in there, she had a Hackney coffee store, she had beauty treatments from Face Gym and that kind of thing. So it's just a really nice way of kind of retailers like letting their guard down a bit and letting people in and thinking more collaboratively.
I love this kind of like mobile store, but there is also this growth, isn't there, of rural retail hubs as well, because people have emigrated out of cities, and there's a whole kind of mass exodus of many cities to sort of secondary cities and rural locations. So what's happening there? Jo, you're seeing, I think you've got some good examples, again, from APAC.
Yeah, I think these really sort of remote destination stores are popping up, and there's one in Japan called Les Six, which is a new concept store which has opened in the country's least populated prefecture of Tottori, and it combines a space that stocks menswear and jewellery, plus there's a bookstore, but there's also an open workshop where you can see craftspeople working on the garments. And so the space really reflects the rural location. The rural location is woven into the whole store design and the whole customer experience. So really the two kind of are really important, and it becomes, I think, a destination for people to travel to as well, which is kind of this added element to it.
Another interesting concept is the Anya High March has done her kind of actually her whole street or whatever. What other kind of urban hubs, if you like, or retail hubs developments are we seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Anya one is really nice because it's creating this sort of mini neighbourhood within a big city. I think she's done a really great job of creating something that is a real special place that you can go and hang out in. There's a hair salon, there's a cafe, there's a bespoke shop, and her plastic shop which showcases her sustainable lines. But outside those bigger cities, we're seeing developments which prioritise nature alongside retail. So there's one in Texas, in the city of Fort Worth, a development called Clear Fork, which mixes retail, dining and green space on ranch land in the heart of the city. So apart from the stores there, it also has hike and bike trails, luxury living, entertainment and offices. And there's another new concept, a mall concept in Miami called Upper Buena Vista, which describes itself as an open air sanctuary and combines retail, restaurants, but also natural spaces, an events hub, and it's even got a meditation centre. So it's really sort of emphasising that well-being aspect of a day out shopping. It's not just about buy, it's also about taking the time out.
We haven't got much time left, but I wanted to ask who's really innovating with the actual store, and anything you've seen, Jo, that's very exciting. I know we've talked about a lot already, but what else is on the horizon that you've seen that impresses you?
Well, we've been tracking the trend for product-free concepts. So there's the new Bottega Veneta space called the Maze, where visitors go through this sort of immersive labyrinth, which is completely decked out in a really intense, hyper bright green. And you explore different areas with textures like metallics, and then soft installations of these faux foxtails. So it's very, very surreal. It's very sort of hyper sensorial. And so that's another new trend that we're looking at. There's stores that kind of bombard all the senses in different ways as well.
That sounds a little bit like a while ago, a few years ago, as Devlin did that fantastic pop-up down in Peckham with, I can't remember the brand now, which is terrible, but it was like, I think it was a perfume brand, and it wasn't selling anything.
I remember that, yeah. And it just didn't it just have one product, and then you could also, I can't remember, you could go in and you could also smell it, but it was very much engaging all the senses.
Might have been Chanel, but I guess this is all great fodder, right, for people's social media. So it's just feeding into that whole element. So yeah, bring in play to the bricks and mortar, which of course, as you said already, there's like the skate park, isn't there, at Selfridges and things like that. So that's really already happening. I wanted to ask actually about how retail brands might have to pivot, because we've seen IKEA now is going to be selling renewable energy. John Lewis is moving into property. And I just wondered what other changes you see brands making. You know, will they always just sell product? Will they move into sort of education or other roles? And I wanted to throw that question to Ian first.
I think it's a fascinating question, because it's a really interesting area that some retailers are starting to think about this. It's, they understand who their customers are, or they certainly should, and they, have amazing riches of data. And I think we're at that point where retailers have to stop thinking about that their brand can only sell the product that's on their website, in their four walls, that they have relationships with their customers as individuals or communities. And we've seen people like Lululemon sort of thinking completely differently, and not just about what they sell. It's about how they can interact with their customers through creating famously yoga classes, of course, but so much more than that, and thinking about beyond what their brand is. And I think this is going to be an interesting area to watch, actually. How can you stretch your brand into creating whole new different sort of services? It's funny, it just reminds me, when I think back to when George Davis was running Next, he was a real pioneer of, he could imagine that brand, which started as women's wear, then went into men's wear, then children's wear, then into, famously gardening catalogues and home, of course, and a real early pioneer in saying, well, what does the brand stand for? How can I stretch this brand? How can I build into other areas or services? And the things you touch on there, Beth, and I think this is going to be a rich area to watch. I think there's real opportunities for retail to reinvent itself.
Yeah, and especially obviously with the big, climate emergency that we're currently facing, there's clearly got to be almost a shift for companies and brands. I mean, do you see that, Laura? Do you see, you're our sort of retail expert, do you see this sort of, we know about IKEA, we know about John Lewis, can you see other places you can imagine brands kind of moving towards? I know we've already got gamification with luxury fashion, but are there other maybe roles you can see them playing in the future in society?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, retailers are very aware that their spaces need to become multi-use environments. They need to become useful, especially if they have a lot of excess space. And I think, in many cases, people like John Lewis, they're already recognizing that, and they're kind of repurposing shopping centres and space into condominiums, into homes. Old malls are kind of being replaced with housing space, which is obviously a lot more environmentally responsible than starting from scratch. And it kind of allows housing and retail to kind of coexist together, which is obviously, the future of the mall, as we've been saying, where kind of homes and food shops and restaurants and leisure and everything can coexist together. But I think where I'm really interested in, the future of space and the future of retail space, physical space in particular, is where we're going to see this convergence of the physical store and, the digital world. So this idea of the store as broadcast studio, we've been talking about it for a while, but I'm really excited to see how the shop floor is going to continue to be redesigned with broadcasting for live video in mind. Because, the store is going to increasingly become this kind of content studio where people are going to have virtual consultations, and they're going to live stream, and they're going to create TikToks in it. And, we saw this huge pivot towards video chat during the pandemic, and we've seen some really interesting retailers already, like Gucci, using their store really as a broadcast studio to live stream from, and kind of using the store as a backdrop. And I think that will be really interesting to see how that kind of plays out in the future, and looking at how these kind of, as I touched on before, metaverse activations can be brought into the store as well. Selfridges did a really interesting shopping experience back in October with Charlie Cohen, who's a designer, and it was this huge kind of Pokemon themed 3D virtual world activation where it was kind of all in store, but it was all powered on your phone, and you could have you could browse digital fashion, and there was an AR Snapchat lens, and you could shop kind of blockchain powered items, and you could pay on your digital wallet. So just that kind of thing. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen there as digital increasingly encroaches on physical space.
What final question for you, Joe? What are you've got a global view of all the things that are happening. What's sort of exciting to you about the sort of potential future of bricks and mortar?
Well, I'm really interested in biophilic design and how that can be integrated into retail and and store landscapes. So I'm really excited about how stores of the future will be able to, and hopefully will be able to, integrate nature and green space more into what they offer. Things like rooftops being converted into rewilding spaces to bring nature back into that urban space. Some places are already doing it, where they've got rooftop farms to grow the produce that then you can eat in the restaurants and the malls. So I think that's a really exciting element of retail at the moment, and I think that will only grow, like you said, with the climate emergency that we're facing. I think stores need to think about that when they're designing anything new. How can they bring nature and the environment back to the forefront of what they're creating?
Thank you to my guests this week, Ian McGarrigle, Laura Saunter and Joe McGinn, for taking time to speak with us today. If you're a WGSN subscriber, you'll find reports covering many of the issues we touched upon on our Insight platform. And for a glimpse of the very latest retail developments in cities across the globe, do check out City by City. If you're a retailer and don't already know about our sister essential brand, World Retail Congress, quite clearly you should. So head to their website. Their next live event is from the 5th to the 7th of April in Rome 2022. If you want to find out how to subscribe, head over to wgsn.com to discover how you can get access to our service. We're constantly publishing new content focusing on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries. And these now include food and drink, interiors, beauty, fashion and consumer tech. You can subscribe to this show on all major podcast platforms, and if you like what you've heard, why not leave us a rating and review on iTunes? That leaves me just to thank our podcast producer, Roland Bodenham, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for our next episode, when our creative director, Lisa White, will be exploring how we can adopt a living systems approach to design as an inquiry into regenerative futures. And that's with Carol Collette, Professor in Design for Sustainable Futures at Central St Martin's. So stay well, and we'll see you next time.